Hi, I'm Tyler, founder of Cozy Earth. When you're thinking about the perfect gift, what better way to show your loved ones that you care than by giving them something that helps them feel better, sleep better, and adds superior luxury to their everyday life? If you sleep in our sheets for 100 nights and don't absolutely love your experience, we'll refund your money. No questions asked. This year, give the gift of Cozy Earth. Once they try it, they'll never go back.
Go to CozyEarth.com/Spotify and use code Spotify to save up to 40%. That's CozyEarth.com/Spotify.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids instantly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Sign up for Greenlight today at greenlight.com/Spotify.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
If you're not subscribed so you can listen ad-free, what are you waiting for? Subscribe on Apple or Patreon so that you can listen ad-free and get access to our subscription-only journal entry episodes. Thanks so much to those of you who are already subscribed. Your support keeps the Murder Diaries running.
Welcome to the Murder Diaries. I'm Natalie.
And I'm Paige.
In August of 1997, Arizona State University was a bustling college campus with summer classes in full swing. As students enjoyed life and activities on and off campus, the pop hits of the Spice Girls and Third Eye Blind were most certainly blaring from car stereos. Those who weren't in class were likely working part-time jobs or even enjoying some leisurely time off from school under the hot desert sun. Maybe even cooling off at the Cineplex to see the new Men in Black movie. That summer was a fun and carefree time to be a student, until it suddenly wasn't. Home to more than 50,000 students that year, Arizona State University was, and still is, a prime location to attend college. Nestled on the outskirts of Tempe, Arizona, ASU students enjoy year-round sun, a vibrant desert community, and for some ambitious go-getters, an especially impressive business program. It was this program that compelled Fiona Yu to attend ASU as a freshman in 1995. And it was at this school where she blossomed over the next couple of years, both academically and personally. In 1997, Fiona was about to begin her sophomore year, and she was spending the summer working for the ASU Alumni Society, a university job that she loved, and a place where she'd found a kind of second family. Her coworkers quickly became her best friends, helping the introverted and shy Fiona break out of her shell into a kind of social butterfly she'd never really been before college. But all that changed on August 4th, 1997. Fiona wrapped up her day at work, said goodbye to her friends, and then biked home to her apartment where she would be ambushed, sexually assaulted, and brutally murdered. In a split second, the promising future of a beloved daughter, sister, friend, and student would be wiped away forever. Fiona's murder was the first of several co-ed attacks on the ASU campus that would have detectives on their heels, and a community of college students fearing for their safety and their lives. Most tragic of all was how Fiona Yu, a once shining bright light in the lives of her friends and family, would be carelessly taken from those who loved her most. This is her story.
Used to think it's in my head, but I'm walking with the dead.
Philip and Cecilia Yu met in the early 1980s, a couple who fell in love, got married, and then later settled for good in Southern California. And by 1986, they were beginning a family together. First came Fiona, their shy and sweet eldest daughter. Next were the twins, Samantha and Kevin. And a few short years after that, baby Walter was born. Finally, the Yu brood was complete, and the family lived a typical all-American life in Pasadena, a small bedroom community of Los Angeles. Fiona and Samantha may have been sisters, but their relationship growing up was more like best friends. They shared a room together, and the younger Samantha remembers countless nights staying up into the wee hours, she and Fiona talking about boys and friends and school. But it wasn't long before Fiona was graduating from Arcadia High School, heading off to Arizona State University and leaving her little sister behind. When Fiona arrived at ASU, the best way to describe her personality might have been mild-mannered, maybe even introverted. But she was also a focused and good student. From the very beginning, Fiona immersed herself in her academic pursuits, navigating through her coursework with diligence and dedication.
And then there were those close connections she'd made at her job at the ASU Alumni Society gift shop. Her coworkers remembered her fitting right in and bringing a special kindness to work each day. Her coworker Arlene said, "One of the gifts I think that she gives to people she befriends is simply that friendship, very innocently, unconditional friendship." Her sister Samantha said she was really quiet around people she didn't know. Once Fiona got to know someone, however, she would open up.
A perfect example of this unwavering friendship was the time that Fiona had gone home for the holidays and returned to work the next week with gifts for each and every one of her work friends, says coworker Bonnie Rasmussen. She kept giving little gifts to us once she felt close to us, and that was her token. That was her gesture. As for her college boyfriend, Mark Hoffman, he recalls Fiona as playful and fun, that she was always like a little kid wanting to have fun. He said, "I just don't understand why anyone would want to harm a person like her." One of the detectives on her case, Tom Magazzini, learned as much as he could about Fiona while investigating her murder. He said Fiona lived life as well as anyone could expect. She was a petite, mild-mannered person who never looked for trouble, but trouble found her. August 4th, 1997 was a Monday. The temperature in Tempe peaked at around 106 degrees that afternoon, just another hot day in the desert. Fiona attended her summer classes and then worked at the ASU alumni gift shop until around 5 p.m. While it was unclear what her plans were for the evening, her coworkers remembered exchanging friendly goodbyes before she left for the day. It was then that she got on her bike and pedaled the mile-and-a-half home to the Cypress Gardens apartment complex, just east of the ASU campus, where she lived with her roommate. When she arrived home shortly after 5 p.m., Fiona dropped her bike and her backpack just off the interior main entrance of the apartment. She then exited the apartment through the back sliding glass door to go pick up the day's mail at the complex community mailboxes, which was approximately a 2-minute walk from her apartment. At around 10 minutes past 5, she was spotted by a neighbor who saw Fiona returning to her apartment with mail in hand. Now, when Fiona's roommate Kazu Ito arrived home from her summer job, the apartment was quiet. Kazu noticed Fiona's bike and backpack in the foyer and assumed Fiona was either upstairs or getting the mail. So Kazu headed to the kitchen to figure out a plan for dinner. Around 6 p.m., the phone rang. It was Kazu's boyfriend. The two spoke on the phone for a while, said their goodbyes, and then Kazu returned to the kitchen to finish making dinner. And it was at this point that she began to feel a little uneasy. It had been 45 minutes since she'd arrived home, and the lack of activity in the apartment and Fiona's sustained absence made Kazu feel like something was off. If Fiona's bike and bag were in the hall, then where was Fiona? It was at this point that Kazu went upstairs and found Fiona face down on the apartment's upstairs landing, barely clinging to life. Her shirt had been removed, her pants had been lowered to her ankles, and there was trace evidence of blood on her body. Kazu called 911 immediately, and authorities and paramedics were dispatched. As the medics frantically worked to revive Fiona, it was determined by authorities that she had been sexually assaulted and strangled. Fiona was then transported to Tempe St. Luke's Hospital, a quick 4-minute drive away, where she would eventually succumb to her injuries. On the scene that evening from the Tempe Police Department was Detective Larry Baggs. The first investigative inclination by authorities was that maybe Fiona had surprised a burglar when she arrived home. But Baggs was considering something different. "My first thoughts," he said, "is this is someone who knows her, I think. Did she let them in, or were they already inside? That I didn't know." One of the most baffling aspects of this case for Detective Baggs and his fellow investigator Tom Magazzini was the window of time in which Fiona's murder took place. Given the time frame of when the eyewitness neighbor saw Fiona returning to her apartment with her mail, and Kazu's account of when she arrived home from work and began cooking dinner, the assailant would have had no more than 15 minutes, 20 minutes at the absolute maximum, to attack, sexually assault, and strangle Fiona.
Magazzini described the attack as a blitz attack. It came out of left field, he said, and boom, she was attacked. How the assailant wasn't identified by somebody at the apartment complex or discovered in the act by Kazu herself seemed almost impossible to detectives.
Late into the evening of Fiona's assault and murder, Tempe police were finally able to reach Fiona's aunt, who lived in the area, and they informed her of what had happened to her niece. Fiona's younger sister, Samantha, remembers receiving the news. She said, "I think it was around 2 a.m. or so, and my brother was on the phone, and he clicked onto the other line, and there was my aunt, and she said, 'I need to talk to your father.'" Philip Yu was stunned. "I couldn't even believe what I heard," he recalls, "and I said it would be very difficult for me to relay the message to my wife." So Philip asked Fiona's aunt to tell his wife what had happened. Samantha remembers the shock and denial her mother experienced that night on the phone. "My mom was saying, 'You probably have the wrong person. This is not the same person. There's no way. There's no way it's going to be Fiona. There's no way.'" But it was her daughter. 21-year-old Fiona Yu was dead. And because she couldn't tell the tale of who committed this senseless crime against her, it was up to the Tempe police to use all available skill and resources to unravel the mystery of what exactly had happened. Had Fiona been in the wrong place at the wrong time, crossing paths with some random assailant? Or was her assault and murder caused by someone with intentions specifically aimed at Fiona, someone whose dark obsession with her had grown over time? As Tempe police dug into their investigation of Fiona's murder, they began to look at the people around Fiona Yu at the time. Who was in her life? Who were her friends? Who was she dating? Did she have a boyfriend? Did she have more than one boyfriend? This led them to Mark Hoffman, Fiona's longtime college boyfriend. Detective Baggs quickly learned that Fiona had ended the relationship with Hoffman just weeks before. But Fiona's roommate Kazu told police that she thought Hoffman was in New York the night of the attack. In the days after Fiona's murder, per an Arizona Republic newspaper article, Sergeant Toby Dias said, "We just want to talk to him, find out what he knows." Mark was watching television with his father in New York when the phone rang around midnight Eastern Time. It was the Tempe police informing him of Fiona's murder. Mark vehemently denied having anything to do with her murder, and even though investigators were able to confirm his whereabouts with this call, it wasn't enough to eliminate Mark as a suspect. For all police investigators knew, Mark could have murdered Fiona and then caught a late flight to be in New York at the time that they called him. Hoffman returned to Arizona with his mother so that he could be interviewed in person. Meanwhile, Fiona's autopsy had revealed an abundant amount of DNA from her killer, which would eventually be the thing that cleared Mark once his own DNA sample was submitted for comparison. But there were other suspects. Mark asserted that Fiona had begun spending time with another young man that she met at a bar. And unfortunately, detectives were never able to figure out who this person was. Detective Baggs and the Tempe police then zeroed in on Fiona's circle of friends. And that's where they discovered a young man in her orbit who was known to have a crush on her. Police also found out about an individual who lived in another apartment complex next to the one that Fiona lived at, who had an altercation with roommate Kazu's boyfriend. These individuals were contacted and interviewed by police, who also collected DNA samples. As the investigation continued, police were desperate for an eyewitness, anyone who may have seen something unusual or suspicious. And then they found someone, a neighborhood maintenance man who said he had seen someone at Fiona's door that afternoon, just before she arrived home. The maintenance man, who to this day has chosen to remain anonymous, voluntarily gave his statement to the police and wasn't considered a suspect in the case. The maintenance man said he didn't know Fiona well, but he'd been around the apartment complex enough to observe that Fiona seemed like your typical student, splitting time between school, work, and home.
On the day of her murder, the maintenance man said he was across the street from Fiona's apartment complex when he observed a tall black male exiting Fiona's apartment. This person exited the apartment, paused, looked around, and then closed the door and left. Unfortunately, there was little more information about this person to give detectives, which didn't give them much to go on. When you think about a successful business, like Only Murders in the Building star Selena Gomez's Rare Beauty, sure, you think about an in-demand product that's high quality, that has scary good marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually a business behind the business, making selling and buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet and the not-so-secret secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%. This means way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So if you want to grow your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling and strolling. On the web, of course, in your store, in your feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret that the businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout that Rare Beauty uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/murderdiaries, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/murderdiaries to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/murderdiaries.
And at the same time, DNA results were coming back from samples that had been provided by their suspects. One by one, the results eliminated everyone of significance. It was just one more dead end in a series of dead ends that investigators would continue to face. It seems as quickly as they'd made some traction on the case, police found themselves back at square one. And then the unimaginable happened. As investigators grappled to gain even the slightest foothold on Fiona's case, a sudden epidemic of violence against young co-eds broke out in the ASU community. Most of the incidents involved women walking alone at night, but 2 attacks in particular raised the eyebrows of investigators due to the stark similarities to Fiona's attack. 6 weeks after Fiona's rape and murder, these 2 young women were assaulted in broad daylight. But thankfully, both women survived their sexual assaults and were able to tell police about the person who attacked them. And much like the eyewitness description from the maintenance man outside of Fiona's apartment complex, the assailant in these new attacks was described as a large black male. The first victim, who had been swimming in the apartment complex pool, was blitz attacked when she returned to her apartment. The attacker entered through an unlocked door and slashed her with a pair of scissors before sexually assaulting her. And something of note is that this victim's apartment was no more than a half mile from where Fiona lived. Then the next day, another young woman was attacked in her on-campus dorm room, which was also remarkably close to Fiona's apartment, about a half a mile away. Notably, it was also a quarter mile from the ASU Alumni Association gift shop, where, if you remember, is where Fiona had worked. The victim, a 17-year-old sophomore, was studying in her room when there was a knock on her door. She looked through the eyelet on her door and saw 2 black males standing outside. When she opened the door, she was immediately attacked by the larger of the 2 suspects, who also demanded money from her. It's important to mention here that both new victims were strangled by their attacker until they passed out. ASU Department of Public Safety Chief Lanny Stanbridge said, "I'd say it was a particularly brutal crime. When you have your hands on someone injuring them like that, it takes a different mentality." Given the similarities to Fiona's murder, the time of day, the locations of the attacks, and the descriptions of the suspects, Tempe police now felt like they were dealing with a serial predator operating in and around the ASU campus community. These new attacks were of a blitz style in which sexual assault occurred and where the suspect used strangulation as his means of controlling his victim. They were also in tight proximity to where Fiona's attack and murder had happened, and occurred at apartment and dorm-style buildings. Suddenly, a college community that was already on edge because of Fiona's vicious murder had become a veritable powder keg. College students began to fear for their safety and even their own lives. They were afraid to walk across college campus, afraid to go from class to class in the evenings, and they were even afraid to go home to their own apartments and dorms. Was Fiona Yu's attacker and killer connected to the same rogue stalker who was assaulting other students on campus? Tempe police would soon have an answer to that question. 1 week after the back-to-back ASU community attacks, detectives had 2 young men under arrest and in custody. Acting on a tip, police arrest 2 Tempe high school students, Lee Comier Jr., age 17, and Derek Wood, age 16. Court records revealed that both young men had extensive criminal histories. Derek Wood's rap sheet told a story of previous burglary, theft, and aggravated assault charges. As for Lee, well, he had a history of indecent exposure, burglary, and aggravated assault. As Tempe police interviewed Comier and Wood, the two men admitted involvement in the campus sexual assaults. But here's where things get a little weird. During the rape confessions, when Detective Baggs unexpectedly put a photo of Fiona Yu on the table, he got nothing from either suspect. No body language clues or admissions of guilt. Instead, both Comier and Wood said that they had never seen Fiona before, and they adamantly denied having anything to do with her sexual assault and murder. Eventually, their DNA test would prove conclusively that neither man was Fiona's attacker. If there was anything positive to come in the wake of Fiona's death, it was a sense of unity that spread across the campus of Arizona State University that late summer and into the fall of 1997. On September 24th, students came together to rally against the violence. The event was called Take Back the Day and was organized by the National Organization of Women and its 15 active ASU members. This rally was a play on the Take Back the Night marches that had previously been held nationwide in protest for violence against women. Because most of the attacks that summer had to happen to young women in broad daylight, Take Back the Day was a way of reclaiming the daytime hours and making women feel safe again.
At the rally that afternoon was linguistics graduate student Karen. She said the emphasis in the media is, you've got to be more careful. It puts all the burden on the women. It's clear she didn't think that it was fair that people were suggesting these young women were somehow responsible for their own victimization. What we call today victim blaming. Students gathered and chanted, "What do we want? No rape. When do we want it? Now." Others held placards that read, "Blame the criminal, not the victim."
The event featured speakers who recited poems dedicated to Fiona Yu. Students also organized a petition drive to name a bike path after Fiona, who, just before her death, wrote a paper supporting more paths on campus. But as the months passed, leads and clues for Fiona's murder became few and farther between, and they eventually stopped coming at all. Her case eventually became cold, and months turned into years. And then in 2001, criminal profiler John Yarbrough reopened the case to take a closer look at the circumstances and evidence surrounding Fiona's tragic death. Now, before I go any further, I want to give a little bit of background on Yarbrough for our listeners. He had been a member of the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department for 30 years. He spent 16 of those years as a homicide investigator, and basically, he's a cop's cop. From a very young age, he knew he wanted to be a police officer. During his final 8 years at the Sheriff's Department, he went through criminal profiling and crime scene analysis training with the FBI, making him the only criminal profiler in his department. Detective Larry Baggs, who, if you remember, is the primary detective on Fiona's case, had this to say about criminal profiling. "I think that profilers are very valuable assets to investigations, especially of this nature. Their abilities are uncanny, and with somebody who's well-trained and knows what they're doing, they can literally solve a case for you. And profiling this case is something that we've considered all along." So as John Yarbrough dug into the case, he was struck by the horrendous nature of the murder itself, how Fiona was discovered with patterned injuries around her head and neck, her clothing violently removed. For John, determining the exact kind of strangulation was crucial to helping him create a profile of the killer. He said, "I tried to determine whether those injuries were consistent with simply overpowering, containing, and controlling and victimizing, or whether those injuries were inflicted for sexual gratification." Throughout his career as a criminal profiler, John Yarbrough has consistently stressed the non-random nature of most sexual homicides. More often than not, the victim is murdered by someone they're familiar with, and very rarely by some thrill killer blowing through town or somebody acting on psychopathic type urges. It's almost always someone who lives, works, or visits within the environment of the victim. And it was now up to John Yarbrough to help the Tempe police piece together how Fiona was taken from this world, and by whom. The first step he took was something called victimology. It's the process of finding out everything there is to know about the victim. So that's the good stuff, bad stuff, or otherwise. The more a profiler like Yarbrough knows about the victim, the more he can understand the crime.
And this is what Yarbrough found out about Fiona Yu. Fiona wasn't a drug user. She was not someone who had been in jail. She wasn't a person who had multiple affairs with a variety of people. But Fiona was. She was young. She was in good physical condition. She was a student in a very large university in a well-populated area.
Yarbrough then focused on the apartment where Fiona lived. Police already knew that the lock on the sliding glass door in the back of the residence wasn't functioning properly. This was most likely the killer's point of entry. But the question was, when did this happen? Was the killer already in the apartment when Fiona arrived home from work? Or did he come into the apartment after she'd been home when she was out walking to the community mailbox? Fiona's apartment complex management allowed Yarbrough to search an identical apartment layout as the one she lived in during 1997. The idea was that this would help him envision the crime in a space where it actually happened. Examining the physical evidence found on the upstairs landing the evening of the murder, the mail strewn about and Fiona's keys on the floor nearby gave him an indication that the assailant met Fiona unexpectedly, bringing him to the conclusion that this was the more likely scenario, as opposed to her attacker lying in wait or following her up the stairs and attacking her from behind. Through his independent investigation, John Yarbrough was able to envision 3 different scenarios of how Fiona's killer contacted her. So let's go through them. Scenario number 1. The killer saw Fiona that afternoon for the very first time in what amounts to a completely random encounter. Yarbrough says that predator offenders will often go to target-rich environments, so places that offer up a lot of choices for the predator to work with. The ASU campus certainly checks that box. But it's the blitz-style attack at the top of the stairs that makes this scenario the least likely of the 3. Next, we have scenario number 2. And it's the opposite of the first scenario. Number 2 envisions a premeditated attack that was exclusively focused on Fiona and no one else. This means that the killer knew that Fiona would be his victim ahead of time and had even gone so far as to determine when and where the assault would occur. In this scenario, he may have even gone to the extra effort of studying her routine and determining the window of time that he would execute his assault. Lastly, we have scenario number 3. This scenario considers some degree of premeditation and even the choice of Fiona as the victim. But for the event itself, it occurred completely spontaneously. Maybe the assailant was observing Fiona as she arrived at home that evening, not intending to attack her. But then the killer spontaneously took advantage of her trip to the mailbox as a way to ambush her inside the apartment when she returned with the mail. Fiona wasn't found with the kinds of lacerations, bruises, or grit marks that might have been caused by someone fighting back against their attacker. John Yarbrough eventually came to the conclusion that the person who sexually assaulted and murdered Fiona was likely someone who wouldn't stand out in the community. He would be someone who was familiar to others in the neighborhood, and maybe even someone who worked in the area or was even a resident of the same apartment complex where Fiona lived. The criminal profiler also believes that this was a longer-term observing of Fiona by the killer. He doesn't believe that this person saw her for the first time that day in 1997 and then chose that moment to victimize her. For days and days, if not longer, this person was aware of Fiona and may have even been monitoring the activity in and around her apartment right up to the time of her murder. It's been more than 27 years since Fiona Yu's life was taken on that hot August day in 1997. But there is renewed hope in solving this long, cold murder case. A new technology is being used by the Tempe Police called snapshot DNA. So, what is snapshot DNA? It's phenotyping that became available for law enforcement agencies in late 2014. And unlike traditional DNA testing, snapshot DNA is predicted image technology, which means that it makes it possible to predict a person's face using at least 1 nanogram of DNA, which is easily accessible at most crime scenes. With this small amount of DNA, a composite image can be created that predicts what a suspect is likely to look like. Using DNA that was discovered at Fiona Yu's crime scene and from her autopsy, technicians and police were able to generate a composite image that may resemble the assailant. And they were able to determine that the DNA belonged to a Hispanic Latino man with black hair, brown or hazel eyes, a light brown or fair complexion, and an estimated age of around 52 years in 2024, which would make him about 26 years of age at the time of the murder. Unfortunately, despite the efforts and advancements in forensic technology, the police have yet to make any arrest or even identify an individual matching the description generated by snapshot DNA testing. Nearly 3 decades have passed since Fiona Yu was brutally slain on the upstairs landing of her Tempe apartment. Today, Fiona would have been about 48 years old. It was clear to everyone she knew in the summer of 1997 that Fiona had blossomed from a quiet, shy, and unassuming girl into a vibrant and confident young woman. Fiona's time away at college had changed her. Given her dedication and focus to her schoolwork and activities, it's very likely that she would have gone on to do amazing things with her life. CEO, business owner, wife, mother, anything seemed possible for the kind, loving, and motivated Fiona Yu. And people are still missing her dearly to this day, especially her sister Samantha, who once remarked that her greatest regret was not being able to grow older with Fiona. She said that she remembers the great relationship and special bond that was growing between the two of them. She said we were getting to the age where the older you get, the closer you get, we would have grown up and talked about marriage and our kids. As for her coworker, Bonnie Rasmussen, she summed it up this way. We miss her. We'll never know what she would have gone on to become. Most of our students keep in touch with us and they let us know what they're doing and where they're working and where they've moved, the families they have. And with Fiona, it stopped at age 21. Another coworker, Arlene Chin, said it was very surreal that something so brutal could happen to someone so innocent. If you have any information about the murder of Fiona Yu, please contact the Tempe Police Department at 480-350-8311. All calls are confidential and you may remain anonymous.
Until our next episode, make sure to follow us on all of our socials at The Murder Diaries Pod and subscribe so you can listen ad-free and check out our journal entry episodes. And remember,
Stay safe.
bye.
The search for truth never ends. Introducing June's Journey, a hidden object mobile game with a captivating story. Connect with friends, explore the roaring 20s, and enjoy thrilling activities and challenges while supporting environmental causes. After 7 years, the adventure continues with our immersive travels feature. Explore distant cultures and engage in exciting experiences. There's always something new to discover. Are you ready? Download June's Journey now on Android or iOS.